David Deptula is a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General. Welcome to our program, General Deptula.
Hey, it's great to be back. Thank you.
Security Service of Ukraine has struck the Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat, one of Russia's biggest oil refinery, located more than 800 miles away from the front line. In Ukraine, also, the SB-operated drones have struck a key crude oil processing unit in this facility. Do you see this as another sign that Ukraine is not losing the war, but actually is winning this war?
No, I agree. I agree very much that, in fact, Ukraine is winning this war. Look, the pressure that Ukraine is not just putting on Russia, but it's intensified by using its long-range cruise missiles. You know, some people call them drone, and in reality, these are cruise missile strikes. Have had a very important effect. I mean, Russia's even weighing temporary oil output cuts because the damaged facilities can't take any more crude. And, you know, it's just another piece of evidence, in addition to the massive losses at a rate much, much greater than, while Ukraine's taking losses, Russia's taking losses much greater. At a strategic level, you know, Putin's aim, one of his aims was to split and destroy NATO, and all he's done is made it stronger with the incorporation of Sweden and Finland. And the bottom line is he's not making the kind of progress that he had anticipated. And Ukraine is in the driver's seat, and with continued support, because Ukraine is smaller in terms of material and manpower than Russia is, but the innovation that the Ukrainian military and people are showing, quite frankly, is countering that size advantage that Russia has. And so I fully agree that Ukraine is winning this conflict right now.
Let's cover also this specific strike, because it was more than 800 miles deep inside the Russian territory. What does it mean in terms of capabilities and this drone attacks deep inside Russia?
Well, why this matters militarily is because hitting the oil system raises Moscow's wartime costs. It strains their fuel supply chains to include aviation fuel, which allows them to fly their bombers and long-range aircraft to continue to shoot missiles at Ukraine. And it forces Russia to divert their scarce air defense systems deeper into its rear. So Ukraine's ongoing strike campaign targeting critical Russian energy infrastructure is generating compounding effects on Russia's ability to finance its war against Ukraine, and it is exacerbating critical gasoline shortages inside of Russia.
Also, a Russian oil refinery in Volgograd region was hit by Ukrainian drones overnight, forcing it to shut down. The plant, located about 300 miles away from the front lines, and is a key fuel supplier for Russia's military, according to Ukrainian Special Operations Forces. Could this campaign represent the most effective form of asymmetric warfare Ukraine has at its disposal right now?
The short answer is yes, but it is going to take many different elements. Of course, the ongoing defense of your territory by your ground forces is important, but what Ukraine is doing with these cruise missiles, long-range drone attacks into Russia is what I would call the industrialization of strategic attack at low cost. So Ukraine is moving the war into Russia's rear, where it hurts the Kremlin most. and that's through refinery throughput, export cash, and political implications.
And also, from your perspective, to what extent can this degraded oil refining capacity influence directly Russia's war effort in Ukraine, its military operations?
Well, that's essentially the purpose of doing this. In addition to what I just talked about, the fact that what we call petroleum, oil, and lubricants become scarce, that directly has an impact on the number of sorties that the Russian attack aircraft fly. It has a direct impact on reducing the fuel available for resupply operations of the troops, the Russian troops on the front lines. It has a direct impact in terms of the oil and gas that's required to operate virtually all of Russia's military operations. So the strategic impact is very significant, but so is the impact at the operational and tactical level in hindering Russia's ability to continue its aggression.
Let's cover also peace deal and ceasefire negotiations. How close we are to the end of this war from your perspective?
Excuse me. Well, let's talk a bit about where the talks stand right now. And what Moscow's doing is they're alternating between signaling openness and hard lines. I think you're aware that this month Putin said that the war can end via talks or he will end it by force. Russia also blamed Europe for stalling contacts, while at the same time he's running a major war exercise with Belarus. In reality, Ukraine and Russia remain far apart when it comes to any negotiations. Ukraine rejects negotiations under coercion or on Russia's terms of recognition of its illegally claimed annexations in NATO renunciation. Now, Putin publicly downplays the value of talks unless Kyiv will yield on core demands, and they rightfully won't do that. So the bottom line is diplomacy will move only when Moscow pays a price and Kyiv has options. And we just talked about some of those. And that's its cruise missile attacks in the heart of Russia, and air defenses are giving Ukraine lots of options today.
Also, it was interesting to hear General Kit Kellogg's remarks during his recent visit to Kyiv. General Kellogg says that Russia is losing since Ukraine still holds major cities, and he says that Russian advances in the Donbass don't really matter much because they're not significant. Would you say that most officials in the White House and Pentagon see the situation also the same way?
Well, I'm gonna leave the answer to that question to those officials in the White House, because it's difficult to understand just what their perspectives are. But it's very clear that Putin is not making the progress that he anticipated, and he's continuing to lose thousands of casualties a day. So the fact of the matter is he's not interested in saving lives, and frankly, he's not interested in peace either. To him, Putin's peace still means Ukraine's capitulation. And that's not a settlement. It would simply be a pause for a reload. So Putin only understands force, and part of what we talked about earlier, the strategic attacks on Russia will accelerate his realization that he's losing this war and he needs to stop.
Also, Joint Chief Chairman General Dan Tkiie and General Kellogg, according to Kit Kellogg, recently briefed President Trump on the war in Ukraine, reporting that Russia is facing serious setbacks. As you just mentioned, also Kellogg pointed out that if Russia were truly winning, it it would have achieved much bigger objectives. From your perspective, why does still the narrative about Ukraine is losing, Russia is winning still persist in the United States?
Well, I wouldn't, part of it is media reporting. Part of it is disinformation. But I'd be careful in making the broad presumption that that's the predominant perspective over here. Most of your average citizens understand that after 3.5 years of war, Russia is not progressing at a rate that it anticipated. So, common sense is kind of the coin of the realm to your average citizen here in the United States. And while they hear about Russian, little bits of progress here and there, they're smart enough to recognize that at the rate that they are moving and the incredible defense that Ukraine is putting up, that maybe some of the things they're hearing in the media with respect to Russian progress are not necessarily accurate.
Let's also cover recent drone incursion into the Polish airspace. How significant is that, and how could you assess the reaction of NATO allies to this so-called drone incursion, drone attack on a NATO member country?
Well, my perspective on that is NATO needs to shift from a reactive posture to prevention. And in order to do that, they need to take 4 steps. First, they need to declare that a clear red line exists and that any Russian drone, missile, or aircraft entering NATO airspace without clearance will be treated as hostile and shot down. No exceptions, no excuses. Second, they need to move NATO forces forward. There needs to be 24/7 air patrols over Poland and the Baltics, reinforced with U.S. as well as allied fighters, tankers, and airborne warning and control aircraft. Then Poland's air defense gaps need to be filled with additional surface-to-air missile batteries integrated into both NATO's command and control system and Ukraine's. Ukraine should become part of a European air shield to protect NATO member borders from threats originating in Russia and Belarus. Third, I believe that NATO needs to increase or accelerate the transfer of modern air power into Ukraine. The best way to protect NATO airspace is to stop Russian drones and missiles before they ever get near NATO borders. And that means more F-16s, longer-range surface-to-air missiles, and lifting all the restrictions on how Ukraine employs them. Supporting Ukraine's air defense is not charity, it's collective defense. Finally, NATO must prepare retaliatory options. If Russia or Belarus continues to launch cruise missiles or drones that violate NATO territory, the alliance must reserve the right to strike those launch sites. That's not escalation, it's deterrence. Only by raising the cost to Moscow will Putin stop his aggression.
Let's cover also the reaction of NATO troops, because Poland didn't shut down all the drones, allowing some to cross deeper into its airspace, and it's media reported that Poland and other NATO's air force used expensive missiles valued around $2 million per missile to take down drones that cost not so much, a fraction of that amount. How sustainable is this strategy for a possible prolonged war?
Well, it's not. But first, a lot of people use that cost-effectiveness equation. I'd be real careful about doing that, because what is the value if one of those drones had a large lethal warhead and hit a school and killed several children? then would have the cost of that missile that intercepted that cheap drone have been worth it? And so, the issue here is not on cost effectiveness. The issue is on effectiveness. Now, the point is a good one in the context of, at some point, you've got to be able to deal with mass. So Poland, as well as the other NATO countries, need to immediately improve their air defense capabilities. And I believe a lot of this effort is already underway. But, just like Ukraine has put together a layered air defense system, so should the NATO countries. Now, I think that Poland's already on their way to doing that. They are building an upper layer by expanding their Patriot missile systems and the integrated battle command system. And so they just executed their first Patriot battle command system, live fire. And then there is a lower range layer where Poland could increase and accelerate its procurement of short range air defense systems and very short range air defense systems. I understand they're also increasing their buy of the Common Anti-Air Modular Missile, which is a British-designed missile family that's used by the United Kingdom, and it provides flexible networked intercepts against aircraft, drones, and missiles. So I think they can field a substantially stronger national counter-drone shield in a relatively quick time frame. But they would also be smart to follow Ukraine's lead in how Ukraine has put together a very effective layered air defense system.
There are also some discussions about the possibility of imposing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. It's not a new discussions. There have been lots of such debates since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Would you support this idea, this plan on this during this stage of war in Ukraine?
It's a very good question. As you may or may not know, I was the Combined Joint Task Force commander for the no-fly zone over northern Iraq. And I'm here to tell you, it's a very, very complex and resource-intensive endeavor. So the devil's in the details. It depends upon the circumstances, the location. Are you talking about just Western Ukraine, or are you talking about all of Ukraine? What are the rules of engagement in terms of being able to respond to hostile acts that emanate out of Russia proper? And so, one no-fly zone doesn't fit all. I do believe that there is some value in discussing kind of what I alluded to before, and that's integrating the air defense systems of your co-located nations along your border with Ukraine's. And you could envision, no-fly zone is a term that many people have different perceptions of, but you could envision incorporating aircraft, defensive aircraft from other nations being involved in air defense of not just Ukraine, but their own nations, that would involve flying over Ukraine and intercepting Russian missiles. So, yeah, I think that is an option that needs to be further explored and see if there could be agreement with partner nations to actually implement.
There is also a renewed debate on the U.S. commitment to security guarantees for Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump has pledged to provide Ukraine with good security, and also, according to Financial Times, the U.S. could play its role in providing Ukraine with security, providing backstop for European troops, intelligence, reconnaissance, command and control, and other support. What is your take on that and assessment of possible military options for the US administration?
Well, first let's talk about something that's relatively new that your audience may or may not be aware of, and that's that Washington has approved the first U.S. weapons package paid for by Allied funds under a NATO U.S. mechanism that's called the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List. The initial two $500 million tranches have cleared internally, and deliveries under several Allied-funded packages are already moving. What's in those packages? Well, Patriot air defense missiles and HIMAR rockets are among the first items that are flowing, and about $2 billion has already been secured. So total Allied commitments are expected to reach around $3.5 billion by October, specifically to buy U.S.-made munitions for Ukraine. Now, why does that matter? Well, this is a pretty substantial effort at the burden sharing, what's called burden sharing. That's allies financing U.S. stockpile drawdowns so that Kyiv gets high-impact systems faster, just as Russia ramps up its planning for winter strikes. So, allies are literally footing the bill to move U.S. interceptors and rockets now. And that's speed plus scale when Ukraine needs it the most.
Let's also cover another interesting development regarding the drones warfare. From your perspective, is the U.S. Air Force ready to counter drones? I mean, in terms of massive usage of such drones against airspace. I mean, to counter so-called Russian Air Force tactic, launching hundreds of such cheap drones against military targets.
Well, it's not really just an Air Force problem. The use of drones, quite frankly, is an alternative when combatants are unable to achieve air superiority. And people need to recognize that the Ukraine-Russia war is a set of different conditions than what the U.S. might find itself involved in, say, in the Southwest Pacific, defending Taiwan against a Chinese incursion, okay, where those two combatants are separated by hundreds of miles. And so you're most likely not going to see, quite frankly, a bunch of quadcopters that have a range of about 10 or 15 kilometers making any difference. Now, your question's a good one, because certainly defenses against massed numbers of quadcopters do have an impact. But the United States military is paying attention to that. But we also have means that are not available to the Ukrainian Air Force today, and that's to be able to gain and maintain air superiority in the battle space. And that's why both Ukraine and Russia have reverted to the use of drones, which quite frankly are affecting armor and infantry tactics to a much greater degree than air forces. I would point to the fact that the Russians have not closed down any Ukrainian Air Force air bases yet. And Ukraine is very effectively using the aircraft that they do have in both offensive and defensive roles. So you got to look at the situation. Yes, small drones are a factor. Cruise missiles have always been a factor. They're becoming more of a factor, particularly with threats to the Arctic or across the Arctic into the United States. And as you're well aware, there's a lot of interest in the current administration in building and paying more attention to the importance of layered air and missile defense.
Thank you, General Deptula, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.